at the end of last year, we had the great honor of being sanctioned by the Chinese government for
retaliatory.
Yeah, for the high crime of selling drones to the Taiwan Fire Department.
Welcome to Go No Go. I'm John Brunner. Go No Go is a podcast about manufacturing, design, engineering, and the calls that can make or break great products. We'll begin today with an interview with Adam Bry, the co-founder and CEO of Skydio, the leading American drone manufacturer. He'll talk about what it takes to build a supply chain that's entirely outside of China. Pretty big challenge in today's electronics marketplace. Then we'll talk about recent headlines from the world of manufacturing and engineering, and end with reconstructions, where we revisit the last 20 years of history in the world of civilian drones, and talk about how that space got to where it is today. First, an interview with Adam Bry.
I'm here today with Adam Bry, who's the CEO of Skydio, the biggest American drone manufacturer, and we're in the factory here in Hayward, California. Adam, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
So what is going on behind us? For our video listeners, you can see that we're in a factory. For the audio listeners, paint the picture.
So we are manufacturing docks right behind us. And the dock, I think, is really the most exciting part of our product portfolio because it turns the drone into a fully autonomous device. So the drone lives in the docking station, it charges it, it heats it, cools it if it needs to, and it basically keeps it ready to fly 24/7 so that it can be flown remotely and autonomously. So this is used for all kinds of things, the most exciting of which I think right now is emergency response. So cities all over the US are installing these on the roofs of police stations and fire stations. 911 call comes in, they can click a button, launch the drone, it gets there in a few seconds and can fundamentally change outcomes.
So the age of kind of the consumer drone experience where you have these battery packs and you bring them inside and they last for 10 minutes a piece, that's over.
I wouldn't say it's over. I sort of think that the drone industry has been through this evolution. So the category of drone that we make, small electric flying systems, I think really evolved out of toys. And so I think there was kind of the toys era, maybe like a couple of decades ago, was the only thing you could do with drones. You'd fly them around, they were fun, but they didn't have much impact. And then people figured out if you brought those to work, you could do useful things with them for inspection or real-time awareness. And I sort of think of that as the tools era, where you have a skilled pilot, they know what they're doing, they're flying the drone, can do some useful stuff, but it still requires the dedicated attention of a skilled operator. And we kind of think of this new era as drones as infrastructure, where you install the dock, it's persistent, it's network connected. It's kind of like just having a cloud server where the people who use it never have to physically touch it. So the toys thing, the tools thing, those things are still going. But I think infrastructure is kind of like a new chapter, and the impact, we're already seeing this today in the data from our customers. The impact is 10x anything that's come before.
So what does that impact come from? Is it from, literally having a camera up in the sky, or is it about like automation more than that?
Our kind of ethos identity as a company is building flying robots that give people superpowers. I would say right now we're very focused on flying sensor platforms, and drones are really the ultimate sensor carrying device. They can move unconstrained in 3 dimensions, and if it's autonomous and network connected, you can do incredible things with it. So the core thread across all of our customers is putting sensors in really important places at really important times to get better information, make better decisions, keep people safer. So energy utilities are using these to proactively inspect the grid, find issues before there's an outage, or if there is an outage, they can get there, figure out what went wrong, get the power back on faster. So those are like real civilizational things that all of us depend on. In the public safety world, oftentimes getting to the scene of a crime in a few seconds is the difference between catching the bad guy or not, or saving the victim or not. And we have incredible stories like that, where there was a man in Oklahoma City who was hit by a train, and the drone got there in a few seconds. They found him, they got first responders there and saved his life as a result of the response of the drone.
We've also, as a San Franciscan, I'll tell you, I'm grateful. There have been a few great moments in the last couple of months where, we've seen footage from Skydio drones of incredible police chases, shutting down high-speed car thefts, joyriding, that kind of thing, stuff that the city had never done anything to address until very recently. It seems like this is a critical piece of infrastructure for them.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. I think the default expectation within a few years is going to be any emergency, a drone shows up in a matter of seconds and starts helping first responders do their jobs better.
So in the evolution that you mentioned from toy to tool to infrastructure, that mirrors in a way your own journey, right? You were an RC enthusiast at the beginning?
Yeah, so I grew up flying radio-controlled airplanes. I took this stuff way too seriously as a kid, so I spent most of my childhood either in my basement building them or out at the flying field flying them. I won a couple of national championships actually as a teenager. This is like a niche hobby within a niche hobby. There aren't too many people in the world that care about the world of radio-controlled aerobatics, but it was super fun, and I learned a lot about flight at kind of like an intuitive level. That's what got me interested in engineering, and then I was fortunate to be starting grad school around the time when you could basically take radio-controlled airplanes, put computers and sensors on them, write software to get them to do smart stuff, and that really just became like a deep obsession for me, and I've kind of been chasing that ever since.
So you've seen this evolution then in terms of how you can build drones, right? I think it was Chris Anderson who said that drones are the peace dividend of the smartphone war. Is that right?
Yeah. I think there's a lot to that. I think the drone at a very simplified level, it's kind of like an RC airplane plus a smartphone. Is like the components that go into it.
And so all of these things are just much more available now. Compute, sensing, everything.
Yeah. I mean, we're riding the wave of like tens of billions of dollars of investment in cameras and embedded processors and wireless systems. And the edge AI stuff is something that we benefit from enormously. Like the software that runs on the drone, you can really think of as like similar to what you'd find in a self-driving car. Like it's processing the world around it using a bunch of deep neural networks and predicting to the future and making decisions. And so there's really powerful technology trends that are enabling what we're doing now. Like if you had showed me the product capabilities that we have today when we started the company, like I probably would have thought they were like 2 or 3 decades away.
Connectivity is another one that surprised me too. As someone who owned a hobbyist drone 10 years ago, I would not have imagined that a drone like the Skydio products could stream video continuously into a cloud system.
So one of the shifts as drones become like more like infrastructures, we're actually using infrastructure networks. So X10 has a built-in 5G modem. You can put a second one on it, so it can have 2 active 5G modems. So it can fly with a point-to-point radio, but it can also fly over 5G. And the combination of having all 3 of those radios active simultaneously, 1 point-to-point link, 2 5G radios, turns out to be really important to providing robust capability in every environment. Because we're flying in like challenging urban scenarios where there's a bunch of interference, line of sight issues. And so that's one of the kind of core technology pillars to make these things work.
So before we get into your kind of product development process and going through the technology, just give our listeners an overview of your product lineup. You offer a couple of quadcopter type drones and recently announced a fixed wing product as well.
Yeah, so X10 is our flagship product. So it's a medium-sized quadcopter. And I kind of think of it as like a very versatile workhorse. So it can come with different radios depending on what you want to do with it, different sensing packages for inspection or security or first response or use on the battlefield. But it's all kind of like one core platform. And then you can either fly it from a ground station controller, so something you'd hold in your hands with joysticks, or it can live in a dock and it can be flown remotely over the internet. So there's a bunch of hardware there. There's like attachments and accessories and gimbals and sensing packages and different ground station devices. But it's all kind of like part of a solution set. And that's our flagship product. That's what most of our customers are using today. It serves a bunch of different use cases. But we're very excited now to be taking kind of all the core technologies that we've matured over the last 10 years and putting those into different form factors that meet fundamentally different use cases. So a couple of weeks ago, we announced R10, which is an indoor drone. So we've kind of shrunk down some of the elements of X10 and got it into a package that's about this big that can fly around in very confined indoor spaces, because it turns out a lot of the most dangerous inspection and public safety work happens in indoor confined spaces. And so if you can send a drone rather than a person, you can get better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, go inside your grain silo or your tank or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So, there's all kinds of energy tasks or oil and gas industry where there's these like very dangerous nook and crannies where something could break or something could crack or something can get corroded. And if you can send a drone to do that inspection, it's much safer and more efficient. And then in public safety, most tragic officer-involved shootings happen when they have to enter the unknown. They have to enter a building and they're not sure if somebody's armed or not. And so sending a drone you can establish two-way communication. So it actually has a speaker and microphone on it. So it's a really, really powerful device. So that's still new for us, but the response from the launch was even more positive than we were hoping. And then the other end of the spectrum, our customers also, we work with counties that are thousands of square miles, and X10 is great where you have urban or suburban density. But if you want to be able to respond to something, out in the forest or in rural areas, you need something with longer range. So we announced a fixed wing drone, which we're also extremely excited about. And that's a little bit of a longer development process for us. But I think at scale, docked fixed-wing drones offer the promise of having a drone within reach of basically like every square mile of landmass on Earth. And it's all building on sort of the same core technology and fits together as like a family of products.
So you think a customer will typically have several of these, and it's just a fleet that they can infrastructure, as you say, right? You just dispatch whatever's needed.
Exactly. Yeah, we talked about these flying robots, and the way that I think about our near-term sort of product objective is building the world's best automated data capture platform. And so we see R10 and X10 and F10, the fixed-wing drone, as a family of flying robots that meet all the data capture needs that our customers have. And you could pick like an energy utility. They need to do an inspection inside of a power generation facility where they'd use R10. They need to inspect substations where they might use an X10, and then they need to cover thousands of miles of transmission line where they'd probably use an F10.
So the most notable thing about where we're sitting right now is that we're sitting in your factory in California. You're doing all of your own manufacturing. It's domestic. Why?
Yeah. So good question. So when we started the company, we started in 2014, and far and away conventional wisdom at the time was, Silicon Valley companies can do software. Maybe they can dabble a little bit in the hardware design, but for sure you want to go and manufacture this stuff in China. And so, we were three co-founders. We came from primarily software backgrounds, working on AI and autonomy software for flying systems. I mean, my co-founders and I, we'd built hardware before, but we weren't like product development professionals. And so we were like, yeah, we'll follow conventional wisdom. And we actually, with our first product, started down the path of working with a contract manufacturer in Asia, which is a great organization, but it basically became clear that like they didn't know how to build drones. We didn't yet know how to build drones.
Yeah.
And it was not going to work for us to like try to figure it out jointly with them, with a small team on our side. And it was really out of just sort of necessity of like, if we want to build a great product and get something to get market quickly, like we need to do this ourselves because we don't know what they're doing. We don't know what we're doing yet. They don't know what they're doing. We just need to like figure this thing out. And so we built our first product, R1, in-house because we felt like that's just how we're going to get the best capability the fastest. And I think that in hindsight, I think that we kind of like arrived at one of the fundamental truths in this space that we're in, which is that these are real aerospace devices, and design and manufacturing are very tightly coupled in many ways. And the best companies, I think, end up being pretty vertically integrated. And so, that's the path that we've been on ever since. And every generation of product, we've gotten better at the design and the manufacturing of it. And now I see it as like a critical strategic thing for us, and not just for us as a company, but also for us as a country. I mean, drones have become, as they become infrastructure, they become more important in every context, defense, civilian, and it's like very clear at this point that I think we need to have strong domestic drone manufacturing, and we're super proud to be doing it here. I mean, like at the beginning, 12 years ago, people would think it's insane to have a drone factory in Hayward, California, but here we are. I think we're the largest drone factory in the U.S. We're serving customers all over the world, and I'm very excited to keep doubling down and investing in that.
Yeah, for people who aren't seeing the video, there's an enormous American flag behind us, and actually an even bigger one on the other wall that you're not even seeing in the video. So
yeah, just to make sure you know where you are.
Exactly. I want to talk a little bit about the national security, strategic angle. But before that, I'm curious about your experience with a contract manufacturer. This is something you talk to a lot of hardware founders about, a critical early decision. Do you have a CM build your product, or do you do it in-house? It's like a little harder to spin it up in-house, but then you get the advantage of learning as you go. What's the kind of thing that would go wrong with a CM that you're able to fix, by having it in-house?
Well, I think, contract manufacturing and manufacturing in general is an extremely complex, sophisticated discipline, and the contract manufacturers, have incredible capability. I think the thing that we found is that you can basically just get faster cycles on a lot of stuff if you're controlling it yourself. And I think it depends a lot on what you're doing. Like if you want to build some new device that's basically some flavor of like a tablet with some custom stuff around it, like that is a very well-known thing on how to do it. There's a bunch of contract manufacturers that can do a great job of that. Or if you want to build like an IP camera or something, like some of these things are like pretty well-established categories where there's a bunch of existing expertise, and you're probably better off like going and taking advantage of that. But if you're trying to build something that's kind of like not as well of established a category, you're trying to innovate in some particular way in the design that's going to trickle through into how you build it, I think those are the things that should push you to evaluate more. Like, should we should we do this ourselves? And, we work with a great network of suppliers, some of which are CMs who are building like sub-assemblies or components or different attachments and accessories for us. So, it's not like, I think there's, no company in the world where you sort of like take in like raw ore in one end and like out the other end comes the thing. Like you're always going to have
Ford in 1920 or whatever.
Yeah, you're going to have some kind of supply chain. I think it's just a question of like, what are the things that like we think we can by doing ourselves, we can deliver like a better product faster, and let's focus on those. And for drones, we've made the assessment that the kind of like final assembly and test and integration of the systems is something where it's advantageous for us to do that piece.
So drones as an entire category of product, you're still very much pushing the frontiers forward. It is not a well understood problem like you say with like a tablet or something like that. Where do you go for expertise? Do you go out and hire a lot of like seasoned aerospace engineers, or do you find that they're like too set in their ways and actually you hire people from the world of consumer goods?
I'm a very big believer in just kind of like raw talent potential. So I would say in general, we're just looking for people that have like exceptional intellectual horsepower and like a very strong drive to get things done. And I always, I oftentimes like run the mental experiment of, would just like a brilliant, driven, like, new grad out of engineering school, like how would they approach this?
Yeah.
And versus like, with more knowledge and more sophistication, what are we doing? And like, should we do more of like what they do? So I think there's a lot to be said for just like really, really smart people who are driven and motivated, and at any age, more than anything, really. Yeah. I think I sort of think of what we're doing as a fusion of a bunch of different things. And I think we're sort of a lot of consumer electronics mindset and ethos, like mapped sometimes painfully into building aerospace devices. And so I view us as on drawing on kind of like both of those development paradigms. And as our products get bigger and we reach larger scale, like by the end of this year, we'll be on a rate of doing about 1 million flights per year.
Wow.
Over U.S. cities in high stakes scenarios. Yeah. So like safety and reliability are critical, and are becoming ever more important. And that's, our first product was consumer focused. It's been a shift for us to get into the mindset of like, the most important feature and capability of the product is the safety and reliability of it.
Yeah.
And so we need to be very, really rigorous and really careful about how we think about these things. But that's, the patterns that we're using there are not altogether different from how you think about like reliability of a consumer product. It's just, it's sort of a different application of a lot of the same ideas.
As you've shifted from consumer drones to professional infrastructure drones, are there ideas that you've had to shake off to make that shift?
Yeah, I think just like elaborating a little bit more on this notion of safety and reliability becoming the most important thing, like especially when we were building our first generation consumer product, the most important thing was like, how good was the product when it was at its best? Like how amazing can we get this thing such that people like pay attention to it and care about it, and it'll make really cool videos that'll sort of get the world to care about this startup that they have no reason to care about otherwise. And so I'd say what we cared about was sort of like the top end of the distribution of what the thing could do. Now the bottom end of the distribution is the most important thing.
Right.
It's like it needs to work every single time.
What goes wrong if it doesn't?
Yeah, what goes wrong if it doesn't? And that's been a mindset shift and it causes us to be a lot more sort of rigorous statistically and looking at data coming back from our drones and analyzing failures with a deep level of attention to detail, and having a bunch of processes in place inside the company where we're just continually turning the crank to make the systems more reliable in the scenarios that matter the most. And I love engineering. I love challenges. I think it's just like they're all different flavors of like problems that you're trying to solve. You just got to be clear about what you're trying to accomplish.
You guys have been remarkably transparent about failures. You have a reliability dashboard. You're very open about it. What's behind that thinking?
So there's a couple of things here. I think one, we are accountable to our customers, and so I think the most important thing for us, the most important thing for me, is delivering like the capability that they need. And if something goes wrong with one of our products, we want to be the first ones in front and center, like talking about that, to send a signal to them that like we know about it, we're fixing it, we're sorry. And so that's kind of one piece, is just direct accountability to our customers. The second one is I actually think transparency is one of the most powerful tools to improve safety and reliability, because it helps everybody be on the same page. It forces a high level of rigor in data if you're going to publish this stuff publicly. So it helps us get better. And I also think it puts our customers in the position of being able to make more informed decisions. So, we publish, we call it our flight reliability rate, which is basically like the incident rate on a per flight basis. And I think publishing that helps customers make informed decisions about, like, should I fly this mission? And if I'm going to fly it, how should I fly it? Like, you want to minimize time where you're flying over populated areas, because if something does go wrong, you don't want to hurt somebody. And so I think it gives everybody like a solid base of information to make good decisions.
So I want to get into geopolitics a little bit. You mentioned the strategic importance of being able to build these drones in the U.S. There's also it's also commercially difficult, right? I mean, DJI out of China is an extremely competitive company that introduced a remarkable product 10 years ago. How did you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, the competitive bar from China is extremely high, and I think that there's a few different angles on this. I think one, I would say that the sort of like the toys and tools era played to the strength of the Chinese companies. I think the infrastructure era it's related set of technologies, but some fundamental things change about who uses drones and how they use them, and the importance of AI and autonomy and connecting to infrastructure networks and so on. And so these are big bets that we made that I think play to our strengths as a company. And to some degree, I think play to our strengths as a country. And I think that has been a pretty successful competitive vector for us. We're investing in the things that, in our view, is like where the industry is going, are becoming more important. And I think that's one of the things that's enabled us to survive and succeed in the face of a lot of Western competitors getting killed by the Chinese companies. And then the other thing is, as drones have become more important, I think there's a broader recognition that strategically it's important for us to have a domestic source of these products. And we benefit from the fact that a lot of our customers have a preference for buying a drone from a more trusted U.S. company, and there's government policies that are leaning heavily in this direction. And this is like a controversial thing within the drone industry, but like I think there's a range of opinions out there, but I don't think there are too many people that would say that it's not important for us to have like a U.S. manufacturing base of this technology.
We're sitting in a pretty large, Skydio owned manufacturing facility here in California. But as you say, no one has, a Ford motor plant from 1920 where like iron ore goes in one end and cars come out the other end. So you have other suppliers bringing you components, you're assembling them, you're integrating them. How do you make sure that supply chain is high quality and secure? I mean, this has got to be a national security concern at some level.
For sure. So, there's some good fun history here. I mean, as drones became more important, and it became more clear to like us and our customers that like it was strategically important to have a U.S. Manufacturing base and a secure supply chain. We did a lot of work to get our supply chain out of China. Historically, like almost all drone components are made in China. So this was already like something we were quite focused on. At the end of last year, we had the great honor of being sanctioned by the Chinese government for
retaliatory.
For the high crime of selling drones to the Taiwan Fire Department. And so that was kind of a pretty aggressive forcing function to take the last few steps.
Your vacation options are limited, perhaps now.
Yeah. Also been sanctioned by Iran.
Okay.
So there's a couple places that have gotten crossed off the list.
These are good things to happen, I think.
So we had a few components that were still coming from China. The most significant of which was our battery, and it's been a major project, but one the team has done an incredible job on to bring up a non-Chinese source for our batteries, which is now up and running, and has actually been an increase in performance and capacity. And so, my positive view on this is that the Chinese government is now just helping to make sure that our supply chain is very secure.
Right.
By cutting off non-secure options.
Yeah, so. Forcing function. It can be useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your strategy for making sure that your suppliers are high quality? Are you doing a lot of inspection as things come in the door, vetting at the supplier? Like, how do you make sure that this all comes together?
So one of the things that this is kind of like a mental framing that I think about building hardware is it's really like a battle against entropy. Like there is a very narrow configuration of bits and atoms that will result in your product working the way that you want. And the nature of the universe is that, that's not the like natural state of things. And so it takes, I think it's basically, you need to do everything. Like you need to, at the very outset of engaging with suppliers, be like deeply proactive about like what are they doing and how do they think about supplier, how do they think about their own internal quality processes, what's their reputation, what are other products that they've made or other components that they've made. And then I think you want like deep engagement in, oftentimes we're doing co-development with our suppliers and some custom part or something, like deep engagement so that we really have our own deep understanding of like what they're doing and how it works. And then you want to work with them to set up appropriate quality controls on their side. And then you want to test the stuff when it comes into your factory. And then you need, testing and assurance at every stage, I think is really important. And then very fast feedback cycles. And this is one of the things where having our own in-house CT scanning capability has been really important because we're generally just looking for anything that's going to make for faster feedback cycles.
Yeah.
So being able to do like testing ourselves and do early failure analysis and find issues without having to send a part out and wait 3 days for somebody else to do it and then get the report from them and then go back and ask questions, like anything that's just going to like shorten those cycles. I mean, on the other end of the spectrum, I sort of think of it like 3D printing for prototyping. It's like being able to like 3D print and just like very quickly see, is this going to work? I think having in-house failure analysis capability is kind of like a similar idea on the back end.
So to bring us back into geopolitics, Ukraine has become an incredible laboratory for the development and application of drones. Are there any Skydio drones in Ukraine?
Yeah, we've delivered thousands of systems at this point to Ukraine, and we've learned a bunch of hard lessons there about what it takes to make these systems successful on the front lines. I've been myself a couple of times. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things happening there. I mean, I think one, just the like what they are doing from every angle is incredibly impressive. And one of my main impressions going to visit is just the level of, under tragic circumstances, but the level of kind of like national unity and focus and clarity of mission is a stark contrast to like, our experience in the West. And it's really out of tragic necessity.
It seems like it is almost like their World War II moment in terms of the focus that it's brought to their industrialization.
Yeah, it's a total war effort. Like every part of the government, every part of the civil society, everybody you meet, I mean, they're all focused basically on the same thing. And then the level of innovation in drones is incredible. I mean, it's born out of necessity. But talk about fast feedback cycles. I mean, they are just constantly like learning and evolving. There's always, the military is oftentimes like notoriously bad at predicting like what's the nature of the next conflict going to look like. And it's easy to overfit over to like the last one. So I think nobody can say exactly what like, if the U.S. found itself in a great power conflict, like what exactly is that going to look like? But I think it's pretty clear that drones are going to be a major component of it, and you can see that with what's happening in Ukraine. And I think that it's happened somewhat gradually over the last 3 years, but I think that has been a wake up call for lots of folks in the U.S. to just realize that we've got to lean way more aggressively into this tech.
And if we're heading into a drone war, you don't want all of your drones to be made in China.
Certainly not.
There's some kill switch somewhere.
Yeah.
So thinking about Skydio as part of the nascent, arsenal of America's drone defense system, what does the U.S. need to do to have 1,000 more Skydios doing this kind of manufacturing here, cutting edge development of the products that can be part of our national defense and be part of our national kind of technical ecosystem?
I mean, I would say the number one thing is being focused on buying products that are working and meeting the need. I think that there's a lot has been said and written about sort of the DoD or DoW now procurement process. But I think the more that they're just purchasing at scale in volume the systems that deliver useful capability for their end users, that everything else is downstream from that. Like the right companies will build the right products. The right supply chains will get developed, and so I think that's it's not magic really. It's just like let's buy products that work and meet the need that we have.
Well, and you guys have a product development timeline that is, let's say, not an F-35 product development timeline.
Yeah, it's a much faster cycle, and the beauty of that is that you're not making like one or two like $10 billion decisions. You can make like a bunch of like $10,000 decisions, and so. Because of that, I think, purchasing drones more like you'd buy like phones or laptops makes more sense than kind of like the traditional legacy systems.
Do you see that kind of flexibility on the way from the federal government? Like, are there more procurement programs that have that kind of ability to adapt quickly and work with partners like you?
I would say at the senior levels, especially under the new administration, I think that like the direction is exactly right. I think they get it. And I would say at the lower levels, the end users, like there's a massive enthusiasm and incredible capacity to like deploy and use these systems. I still think that there's a lot to sort out in between. From shifting from sort of a more legacy mindset to a faster moving one.
All right. Well, in closing, I'd like to ask you the question we ask everyone who comes on the show. Can you tell us about a time when you've faced a go, no-go moment, and what did you do?
Yeah, so I think there's been a few of them. Actually, it's an interesting connection to the geopolitical stuff. So very early on in the life of the company, we were still 3 co-founders. We were just raising our seed round of capital. We were approached by and when we started the company, we always wanted to build the drone ourselves, but we were 3 co-founders predominantly from software backgrounds. We didn't have any capital. We didn't have any resources. We couldn't claim that we really knew exactly what we were doing when it came to building like hardware products. And so we thought like, all right, well, we'll start out by focusing on the software, and maybe we'll like license software to other drone manufacturers. And so right when we were raising our seed round, we were approached by DJI and GoPro, which were the 2 sort of like, at the time, certainly, the companies that you say like, all right, well, if you're going to license software to anybody making drones, these would be the 2. And they were both very interested, and both of them actually were interested in it became clear they just wanted to buy us. And so this was kind of a critical moment where it's like, all right, well, we could sell the company, we could try to license software to these guys, or we could do what we wanted to do to begin with, which is like develop our own vertically integrated product. And it was a critical moment because especially DJI made it clear that like, if you guys don't do this deal with us, like we're going to crush you. We're going to we're going to come after you, and we're going to like do everything we can to make it impossible for you to compete with us.
They had just crushed several other big names in American drone manufacturing.
They were in the process. And so that I think that was like a really key moment. And ultimately it came down to, it was a combination of kind of like thinking about the business dynamics, but also just like what were we most, like what did we really believe, and what did we believe should exist? And did we have enough conviction in that we were willing to bet on it in the face of like turning down getting acquired and having to go up against some very big companies as competitors. You could at various moments along the way you could question the wisdom of that decision, but for where we are now, I'm very proud that like of what the whole team has done in building Skydio to what it is today, and the impact that our products are having.
Well, it's an incredible organization you've built here, and thank you for keeping us all safe.
All right, thanks for doing this. This was great.
All right, thank you, Adam Bry. It's great to have you on.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to the headlines segment of our podcast, where we talk about recent news from the worlds of manufacturing and engineering. Then after that, we'll go into reconstructions, where we talk about history. But before we do, just a quick reminder that Go No Go is brought to you by Lumafield, which makes industrial CT scanners and analysis software that help engineers deliver great products faster than ever. You can learn about Lumafield and see cool CT scans of everything from aerospace components to AirPods at lumafield.com. All right, let's talk about headlines. I'm joined today by Alex Howe.
Yeah, hi, John. Good to see you.
So we're going to pick back up with drone news. Having just talked with Adam Bry at Skydio, there's been some interesting movement at the FCC.
Yes, so the FCC just gave itself the power to make a DJI ban stick. So there have been several different types of efforts to kind of restrict DJI and its ability to sell in the United States. But what's novel about what they've just done is it lets them retroactively ban gadgets that have been on the company's list. So that means that even older models of drone, we can now ban the sale of them within the US. If you already own one of those products, you are allowed to keep having it, but it's a really big hit for this company.
So it's a bigger tightening of the import restrictions on DJI.
Exactly.
Does it cover their other products like camera gimbals and things like that? They've been successful in some other areas.
So nominally, it's to protect the US networks from backdoors and Chinese telecom gear, but really they can block any consumer electronic that runs on the airwaves. So probably depends on the exact component, but it seems pretty sweeping.
We're going to talk a little bit more about what DJI has been up to lately when we go into our reconstruction segment later. But it looks like, DJI has been conciliatory on the outside, but they are taking some steps to continue doing business in the US.
Yeah, we know that they have been maybe selling their drones under different company names. They've also had a bit of a PR problem because they were put on the Department of Defense Chinese military companies list. And that doesn't impact their ability to sell in the US. It just prevents them from being able to sell it to the US military, which probably weren't going to buy it anyways. But they've actually cited that it's made customers afraid to buy the product for fear of future restrictions, and it's hurt their business. So
it makes it a much harder sell to commercial users, which, as we just heard from Adam, is a good part of the market to be able to operate in.
Yeah, exactly. I have another aerospace type headline for us to discuss.
Awesome.
So the Financial Times wrote a piece about how private jet owners are now renting out their aircraft engines due to a supply chain crunch.
Why would you rent out an engine?
So some private jet owners, they're really attached to the customized interior they have for their private jet. So when they can't find an engine, because actually business jet travel is apparently up 30% since before COVID. So more people are flying private than ever. They don't want to rent someone else's private jet. So for about $50,000, you can hire just the engine for a couple days, swap it. Apparently it can be removed and reattached pretty quickly,
No
even
kidding.
overnight. And then you can fly around in your own plane and then send the engine back.
That is very expensive mood lighting. If that's what you're after, is keeping your own airplane interior.
It's interesting, in this article, a financial advisor says that now some families are turning a profit on their private jets. And these are historically things that are only huge, cost
Giant
things.
money pits. Yeah, exactly. There's some interesting features of the aircraft industry here to unpack. One is that the airframes and the critical components like engines go through a lot of inspection steps all the time, and their maintenance is very, very carefully documented in ways that are auditable by the FAA and really carefully tracked. Everyone has the right certifications to be doing it. So you'd think that borrowing someone's jet engine would be sort of a risky proposition, but that's actually something that the industry has worked its way around and made it possible. You think about if you're operating a big airline like United Airlines, and you have an engine problem, it's convenient to be able to swap the engine out of one 777 and bring in another one that might be sitting in your hangar right now. So it's really worked out for the industry to have this degree of modularity, and that's supported by this enormous emphasis on record keeping and maintenance and auditability. The other thing that's interesting is that the aircraft industry, tries to even out big swings in demand. So there are years where the air travel industry is doing really, really well, and a lot of people want to buy airplanes, and then a lot of years where it crashes very suddenly. A lot of volatility in the industry. If you're trying to operate an aircraft manufacturing line that with enormous overheads and a lot of complexity, you don't want to be ramping your production up and down all the time. So this is why Boeing and Airbus maintain years-long backlogs for their aircraft. They don't want to be ramping production up to 80 737s a month from a factory and then have to close the production back down as soon as there's a financial crisis or a recession. So they maintain these enormous backlogs and then try to even out production. But that means that in times of very, very high demand, you can't get your hands on an engine.
Yeah, it seems too that the aerospace industry is still suffering a bit from labor and parts shortages from COVID-19, probably because those parts are so challenging and labor intensive to develop.
Right. You can't just go out and, source new jet engines from a bunch of overseas suppliers by sending emails to Alibaba vendors. All right. Looking at more transportation news, but on the ground, tell us what's happening in the world of Waymo.
Yeah. So Mission Local reported that Waymo has confirmed it killed KitKat, which was a bodega cat in the Mission here in San Francisco.
I'm sorry.
I know. I'm a huge cat lover. I have a cat at home. It was really devastating to read about this news, but apparently, according to eyewitnesses, KitKat sat in front of the Waymo for about 7 minutes, then walked under the Waymo as the car pulled away, which is the characterization from witnesses, whereas Waymo's statement says the cat darted under the Waymo when it pulled away. So a little bit different.
Either way, it was a cat under a car.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a very sad moment. And it's interesting that this has sort of crystallized opposition to Waymo, briefly at least, in a way that normal operation hasn't. There's always been a little bit of low-level resistance to Waymo, but this seems to be sort of a galvanizing moment for Waymo's opponents.
Yeah, which to me is a little bit odd because I feel like this is a really easily solvable problem for the Waymo. They probably just haven't optimized their algorithm to accommodate for cats. It reminds me how in 2016, there was a Nightscope mall security robot that ran over the foot of a toddler at Stanford Shopping Center. And it's because the robot had been sent to detect people, but people being adults. But children, of course, they love robots. So the toddler ran towards the robot. The robot couldn't see it and then ran over the foot. And very easily they were able to resolve that oversight they had made in the development. So I'm hopeful that hopefully Waymo can similarly maybe flip some switch and prevent this from happening again.
Yeah, those cars are covered in sensors, and it must be possible to have some additional level of detection. The Nightscope robots are the ones that kind of look like cone heads or like chocolate truffles, right?
Yeah, like big eggs rolling around the parking lot or wherever.
Exactly. Yeah, it's we live a charmed life when people can sort of enthusiastically run up to a security robot because it just seems cool and it's not threatening. Yeah, this is a very painful event to think about. But it has put in contrast the danger of Waymos against the danger of regular human drivers. It's hard to find estimates for how many cats are killed by human drivers every year, but it's somewhere between 5 and 26 million a year.
That's
Not
crazy.
to mention 40,000 humans killed by human drivers every year in the US alone. Waymos are around 10 times safer than human drivers. They're involved in about 90% fewer serious accidents than human drivers. And in a lot of the accidents that they are in, it's actually the fault of the other driver. So they're better at sparing the lives of innocent bystanders and at driving defensively than human drivers are. So if you actually care about the world's outdoor cats, you should want more Waymos on the streets. And if you care about the lives of humans. And I say this as a cat owner who had a brief sad moment when I read about KitKat.
I mean, I will only ride in Waymos, especially when I'm going by myself. I just feel so much safer in a Waymo. The quality of the driving on the whole is just a lot more consistent. And recently there was that campaign by consumer attorneys of California. Randomly, I didn't realize they were sponsoring it, but they were driving around all these trucks in San Francisco saying that every 8 minutes someone is assaulted in an Uber, which is really terrifying to think about.
That is. And as a cyclist too, I can say that I feel much safer around Waymos than around any kind of human drivers, especially Uber drivers. I mean, if you look around you when you're on the road, you will notice that half or more of all the drivers on the road are surreptitiously looking at their phones while they're driving, barely paying attention. You can at least be assured that a Waymo is paying attention. This has highlighted for me the kind of intellectual dishonesty of the anti-Waymo movement, which has taken hold on the left in a lot of city councils in the U.S. Waymo is trying to enter Boston right now. They're encountering a remarkable amount of resistance in Boston City Council. This episode with KitKat has kicked off some proposed legislation in San Francisco's City Council that would slow the adoption of autonomous cars. The movement is largely being coordinated by the Teamsters alongside the kind of left edge of these city councils, the progressives on the city councils. And the interesting thing at a political level to me is that Teamsters are no longer the constituents of those legislators. The Teamsters always used to endorse Democrats in presidential elections. In 2024, they didn't endorse anyone. And they took some internal polling of their members and found that they supported Trump over Harris by about 60% to 35%. So Teamsters are not voting for the progressives on the city councils in Boston or San Francisco. So these leaders like Jackie Fielder in San Francisco are really selling out their real constituents, who are mostly white-collar urbanites, who could have safer streets and lower costs of living, and are instead kind of throwing a bone to a shrinking organized labor movement that no longer even supports those politicians.
And also, Uber drivers aren't Teamsters. They're famously exploited, and that's why they're there, right? All of these rideshare companies built their valuations on the premise that they will replace all the people anyways, and so they've always viewed the drivers as very expendable and try to treat them as poorly and pay them as little as possible, which is part of why I think you have a really variable amount of quality, right? Because you're taking really
Yeah.
advantage of people that need these jobs. And so of course it's unfortunate to displace them, but like looking more at like the economy in the whole that put them in that position in the first place, like that's the bigger issue I think the progressives should be looking at.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to go after that isn't driverless cars that make the world vastly safer and less expensive to live in. A lot of jerks on both sides of the equation. Well, Waymo is a remarkable product, I think, that is making the world safer and, more accessible. And so for listeners who haven't taken one yet, next time you're in San Francisco or Los Angeles or Phoenix or a handful of other cities that they've been moving into, definitely recommend hopping in one and giving it a try.
Yeah, it's really amazing just how much more comfortable they are. My favorite memory in a Waymo is we took my in-laws in one for the first time, and the whole time my father-in-law was like, oh, this car drives so much better than my children. And like it would make these maneuvers. Like, it's like, yeah, like my daughter like wouldn't be able to like figure out how to go around this bus, but like the Waymo knew how to do it. It was like the whole time just shading his kids. So he loved it. Now they only take Waymos when they're in the city.
Another convert.
Well, speaking of bodegas, our next headline is about Coca-Cola products. So 3 popular Coca-Cola products, Coke, Coke Zero, and Sprite, were recently recalled for potential metal contamination in the cans.
What's going on with metal contamination in cans?
Yes, so this can really happen like when a tool breaks in the line or so, and it doesn't get caught for some period of time. And so they have to then recall like the whole batch, right? Because they're not sure exactly when the contamination started until they find the breakage in the tool. This was localized to products distributed in Texas, so likely there was some kind of equipment issue with those particular cans.
Canning lines are incredible, super high volume, and a lot more assembly than I think a lot of people appreciate, because you have the body of the can and the lid of the can with the opener, in it. These are 2 separate components, so they fill the can body with the drink product, and then they put the lid on, and then they have to crimp the lid onto the can. So I had always thought of these as being sort of like plastic bottles where, they come to you open and there's a machine that fills it and then a machine that closes it and it's all done. But cans go through actually an almost violent assembly process where they get a lot of very, very forceful crimping in order to put them together.
Yeah, this is classified as a class 2 recall. So it's basically not that bad. It can cause temporary or reversible health problems, but won't be anything long term. And if you do have affected cans, you can definitely send them back for a refund. About 4,200 packs of either 24, 12, or 35 cans were recalled.
Moving on to the other end of the manufacturing value spectrum, computer chips.
Yeah, there's a San Francisco startup called Substrate that's been making a lot of headlines recently. And they're trying to take on the big powerhouse ASML. I think ASML has become a lot more of a household name relatively recently for how important they are to chip factories. When you build a new chip factory, like 25% of the entire cost of the facility could be ASML equipment.
That is insane. They're probably the most important company that most people haven't heard of strategically.
Exactly. And so the product ASML makes, right, it's the lithography machine. So that's what's printing the mask, right? All of those traces, and they've gotten finer and finer as we get these more and more complex chips. They have a technology called EUV that took them about 20 years to develop. That's the gold standard for resolution right now. So Substrate says that they're able to use particle accelerators to achieve really, really similar quality at a fraction of the cost.
What impact would this have on the semiconductor industry if you can reduce the cost of building out a plant this much? What's the possibility?
I think there's 2 big disruptions. The first is being able to have an American source of this equipment. ASML is in the Netherlands, and they have like basically 100% market share. So having a second source will be really valuable for supply chain stability as more factories are being built. And ASML equipment, right, as I said, it's 25% sometimes of a plant cost. It's like a $400 million machine. So if you can do that for less, you can imagine building more facilities as more companies will be able to finance that kind of endeavor.
ASML has brought about a lot of geopolitical negotiation for the Dutch government in particular, because they're at the center of a lot of, strategic sort of defense-related procurement restrictions among Western countries against Russia and China in particular. The U.S. has really leaned on the Dutch government to reduce exports of ASML products to less friendly countries.
I'm really curious to see how substrates equipment is going to go. So they are expecting to be able to launch by 2028. But my thoughts are like, where will ASML technology be at 2028, right? If they're matching the resolution of where they are now, like, will that still be competitive in a few years? It's possible. It does take a long time to develop the leading edge here.
There's got to be a place in the market for slightly less than cutting edge chips. And driving down the price of those products can be really impactful.
Yeah, I'm really curious. There isn't too much information on like what the solution really looks like and how they're going to productize it. An ASML machine, they actually only make about 10% of the components in there. The rest, 90%, it's a really, really tightly managed supply chain. Like even the crystal that goes into it from Zeiss, like takes a year to grow the crystal. And then that's been like co-developed over many, many years to get the optimal resolution. So yeah, I'm really, really curious to see like if this is real and if it can do everything we're hoping it can.
It's always interesting when people suggest that they have a smart way to do something that used to just be brute forced. Well, if the CEO of Substrate is listening, reach out to us and come on Go No Go. We'd love to chat. All right, moving on to the world of luxury goods, also very detail oriented, but a little different.
Yeah, The Independent recently published a really interesting kind of thought piece on saying luxury is over. Superfakes changed fashion. How can big brands fix the mess they help make? And it talks about this trend we've been seeing in fake fashion, where before you might think of like a counterfeit bag being something you buy for like $20 on the street of Manhattan or something, right? But now people are buying like $800 dupes of, say, a $15,000 bag that is so meticulously crafted. It even comes with like the packaging and like a receipt, right? That
Whoa.
makes it look very, very real. What this is a testament to is how, like, before you might have a gray market where a factory worker at a luxury bag factory might make some more bags in their free time and then like sell them out the back door. But now instead you have people approaching these workers for their knowledge. So it's really like corporate espionage to try to understand like the exact milling and the tolerances that could be replicated really, really down to the wire.
So they truly are duplicates. They're not just superficial knockoffs.
Yeah. And so one way the luxury bag companies are trying to combat this is by making only small parts of each bag in each factory so that you can't get all of the information at once. And it would take a really long time to understand all of the parts. But
that's from the Apple playbook, right? I think iPhone manufacturing is sort of compartmentalized. There are few people who understand the whole thing. Everyone is given very like focused areas of knowledge.
Yeah, this is seen as kind of like a Band-Aid, but the bigger issue really facing luxury right now is there's like a really strong perception that prices have been increasing. Like all these luxury brands have like multiple price increases per year while quality is declining. At least that's really the strong perception. And there's also a lack of exclusivity. So that's what's making these fakes like a lot more attractive.
So the real luxury products are ubiquitous and expensive. And I mean, this is borne out whenever you walk around like a mid-sized city anywhere in the world now. And there are all of the familiar luxury brands, with identical stores in the town square. And at the same time, it's gotten expensive. So this is really a matter of consumer perception.
Exactly. And like also people don't dress the same way for work either that they used to.
Yeah. I've noticed.
We were at a startup. So.
Yeah. Here I am in my collarless shirt. I would have gotten fired for this in 2006. But what's the solution?
So the article doesn't quite say a real solution, but they do say that Labubus have been an interesting kind of turnaround for luxury a little bit.
So what is a Labubu?
So a Labubu is a little like creature. We have some here behind us. Actually, I'm not totally sure what it is. It's a monster doll by Pop Mart and it's a keychain.
Okay.
And they really have fostered this sense of like scarcity and exclusivity. Like they're always sold out. There's a big resale market. Like that's why I end up with so many. It's like you go to the store and if they have one in stock, you're like, oh my God, I don't know if this will happen again. I have to buy it right now.
It's a Coca-Cola Labubu. This brand will never reappear.
Exactly. So it's got a little bit of that fun, exclusive feeling that luxury really had a chokehold on before. And the article also talks about a woman who had this big collection of luxury bags she wasn't using anymore, but she got into Labubu. So now she's collecting Labubus for every bag in her collection. And that makes her want to like wear her luxury bags again.
Interesting. So it's like making the experience of wearing these products more interesting, more varied,
More fun.
more fun. I like that a lot. So would you say Labubus are the Beanie Babies of the modern era?
Probably.
That sounds like they're motivated by similar kind of collector interest.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. You see actually the resale prices are going down. For like a year, I haven't been able to buy one in a store, but recently I bought 2 in store, one from 2 different stores, one at Stonestown and one in Union Square. So if I can buy them, they're probably less popular.
So you have CT scanned several real Labubus and then some fake Labubus, some Lafufus, right?
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Lafufus came out of that inability to get real Labubus. So, because it's just like a stuffed doll, right?
Uh-huh.
And they can make, and since it's a blind box, so they just emulate the box and they put this kind of knockoff behind. We also have a Lafufu we can show them on the screen as well. They look a little bit different, but they actually have their own following and their own, kind of like the counterfeit bags. It's like, I'm into the trend, but not so into the trend that I have to be like fully committed to the real one. Like you kind of feel like you're cooler than spending too much money.
They are their own variety of product, I guess, and people enjoy collecting them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll include links to CT scans of real Labubus and fake Lafufus in the show notes attached to this episode. And if you're watching this on video, you can see some of the real and fake CT scans on your screen right now.
And then the last headline I have takes us back into the skies where we were at the beginning of this segment. So there's a new startup called LTA Research that is bringing airships back. And it recently flew over San Francisco. It was its first flight outside of the kind of safe space of Moffett Federal Airfield.
Whoa. Moffett Federal Airfield, famously the home of a big federal blimp program in the early 20th century, right? It has a couple of enormous dirigible hangars that are landmarks in the South Bay.
Oh, those are for blimps? I had no idea.
Yeah, they look like, if a Nightscope robot looks like an egg-shaped chocolate truffle, then the dirigible hangars at Moffett Federal Airfield in Mountain View, California look like a Toblerone bar.
That's a great description.
But yeah, they're landmarks. They were reskinned a few years ago. So for a long time, they were just the frames, and the airfield finally got the money to put the skins back on.
Yeah, I noticed that because I grew up seeing that all the time. And just recently, every time I drove by, I'm like, oh, it's all lit up.
Yeah. I imagine you can't just like search on Instagram and find a guy to renovate your blimp hangar, but big project.
So LTA Research is doing this because they feel that airships can be a really sustainable method of people and cargo, especially as we've been seeing all kinds of supply chain disruptions with like ocean freight and the limitations of planes. This would let you carry a lot more things, maybe not as fast as an airplane, but definitely faster than, say, by truck.
How much can they actually carry? When I think of a blimp, I think of an enormous volume of lighter than air gas and then like a tiny little cabin hanging off the bottom.
It's really unclear to me. I was looking at their website trying to understand this. Like, it almost looks like they would put the cargo like inside where the gas is. But maybe maybe I just like don't understand how to read the website, because looking at it on the outside, yeah, you just see the big balloon shape and then the little carriage on the bottom.
Well, if the CEO of LTA is listening, come reach out and come on Go No Go. We'd love to learn about how airships work and why this needs to be the modern airship era. He's been working on it since 2014, and that's after a long gap, right? The last airship was built by the Navy in the 1960s.
Yeah, that's correct. After the Hindenburg, that really set airships back and they stopped being used for people or cargo transport, really. And that was also when airplanes started to become a lot more mainstream.
Hard to think of a transportation disaster that had a bigger impact on an entire category of transportation. So when I think of blimps, I think of the Goodyear blimp, which is a promotional product. Goodyear made some blimps for the U.S. Navy during World War II and sort of explored it at a bigger commercial level in the early 20th century. Since then, it's been mostly a promotional project. And they have actually had a couple of serious accidents. There was one in 1999 where the airship was destroyed, but both crew members made it out. And in 2011, there was an incident where the blimp caught fire as it was landing. The passengers managed to get out. The pilot was heroic, stayed on the ship to help everyone get out, but unfortunately he died. So it's been around, but it's been a really niche idea so far. It'll be interesting to see if this new startup can commercialize it.
Yeah, it looked enormous from the video.
All right, we're going to move on now to Reconstructions. This is a segment of our podcast where we revisit some part of engineering or manufacturing history and reflect on what's changed and what drove the change. And today, the topic is drones, civilian drones, and how they've developed over the last couple of decades. We thought that after talking with Adam Bry at Skydio, this would be a great topic to dig into. So Alex, tell us about what drones looked like before the modern era.
So the groundwork for the modern consumer drone industry as we know it began with the RC aircraft hobbyists and university research programs. Did you ever have any RC aircraft?
I had a really primitive RC aircraft as a kid and a really primitive RC boat that tipped over in my friend's swimming pool the first time I tried driving it.
Tragedy.
But I never had one of the ones that had a little gas engine in it.
Yeah, I had a foam electric one, but I had a couple actually, because if they landed wrong, the wings would break off since it was a big piece of foam.
So you need a backup airplane.
Exactly. But so that's kind of what they look like in the early 2000s, leading up to 2010. In 2010, the first drone that really looks like what we associate with drones today was the Parrot, which is a French company. They introduced the Parrot AR, and this was a drone that was piloted by your smartphone over Wi-Fi, which they debuted at CES in Las Vegas.
And that product was a big deal, the Parrot AR. I mean, if you knew someone in the early 2010s who had a drone, it was probably a Parrot drone. They were pretty recognizable.
A big contributor to that form factor of drone was the smartphones. So all of those components that were being developed for smartphones, like the processors, the sensors, the cameras becoming more cheap and more reliable, then enabled different types of drone companies to start to take off around that time.
Chris Anderson, who was the editor-in-chief of Wired magazine for a long time, and then went on to found 3D Robotics, which was one of the leading drone manufacturers for commercial drones, referred to this as the peace dividend of the smartphone wars. So basically, all the smartphone manufacturers had invested really, really heavily in developing low-cost, high-volume manufacturing processes for chips and for sensors and for cameras and everything else that goes into a drone, drove the cost of that down, and suddenly it became very accessible to build really, really capable drones.
And in the beginning, there was a whole plethora of companies developing this, all over the world. But by the mid-2010s, a company, DJI, which had been founded in Shenzhen in 2006, took a really significant lead, holding about 70% of market share.
DJI introduced an incredible product when it reached the US market. There's no way around that. And I've often reflected that that was the first product that I saw come out of a Chinese company that reached just global standards of kind of user experience and all-around quality. Up until then, Chinese manufacturing was thought of as kind of the workshop of Western companies who would send designs over there and work with manufacturers very closely and then get a great product out. But DJI originated entirely in China.
Yeah, and during that period of time when someone mentioned a drone, what you would imagine was the DJI Phantom. It was really the iconic image of that technology for the time.
That's right. And it was easy to use. It worked right out of the box. By contrast, a lot of the US drone manufacturers that were around at that time in the early 2010s, mid-2010s, were still basically coming out of an RC hobbyist model. You'd buy a kit. It would take a couple of weekend days to put it together. You'd buy a battery from an RC supplier, put together your radio control sort of pipeline, and then start flying. But these DJI drones that were introduced then were breakthroughs in terms of stability, their ability to communicate with the controller over a really long distance, the quality of the camera footage that you'd get out of them, the automated features for, sort of autopilot type flying. It was a big advance and absolutely critical to the popularization of drones.
Yeah, I think a good example of the challenges of good manufacturing comes from GoPro, right? GoPro wanted to get into drones because people were putting GoPros on all of their drones to record great footage. But their drone, the Karma, they had to recall it because the drones were falling out of the sky. And it turned out the battery clip hadn't been designed correctly. So the batteries would come loose during flight. And then, of course, your drone loses power. And like, that's the last thing you want is this huge hunk of like plastic and metal like landing on someone's head.
Right. At one level, a drone is a generalized smartphone, but at another level, it's absolutely own, type of product.
Yeah. So they released that in 2016, but after, their failures, and also DJI introduced the Mavic, which was the folding drone and a big competitor to the Karma at a much more competitive price point. GoPro discontinued the Karma drone in 2018.
I bought a Mavic drone myself. It was an amazing product. And, I had a few friends at the time who flew drones, and we would all take them out together and get cool footage of stuff. Have you owned a drone ever?
No, I have not.
Haven't had a use for it.
No, they're kind of expensive. And I think too in 2016, right, as they became more popular, there started to be a lot more regulation around consumer use as well, right? That was when the FAA introduced that you would need a certificate in order to fly drones. They did have different restrictions, right, for hobbyists versus professional usage, but you also saw like towns everywhere, like banning drones over public airspace, and it just became a lot more cumbersome for you too. I mean, understandably, they're very disruptive products, like the sound and, knowing someone's recording you that you don't know. But
the regulatory framework, in a way, reminds me of autonomous cars. At first there was no market for drones, and you never saw them anywhere, so they weren't that regulated. And then they started to appear, and people got really nervous about them. And there was a clamping down on the ability of hobbyists to fly these drones everywhere. And then there became enough hobbyists and enough people who use drones for commercial purposes that the FAA needed to put a framework into place that clarified a lot of the rules around where you're allowed to fly drones. And since then, they haven't experienced any new, really serious restrictions in how they can fly. And that's been key to the growth of the industry. So DJI drones hit the US market in the mid-2010s, made a big impact on the consumer drone market, but there's a dark side to DJI. For a long time, American regulators have worried that DJI has ties to the Chinese military-industrial complex, and they've taken several steps beginning in 2019 and sort of intensifying over the last 6 years to restrict DJI's access to the American market. One of the issues is that DJI manufactures in a region that is associated with Uyghur forced labor in China. So there are human rights allegations about DJI.
Yeah, you have to imagine there must be significant information security concerns as well with a company of that size and the nature of the information they're collecting.
Right. And every company in China has some degree of integration with both the state and the Communist Party and, potentially the military as well. It sounds like the allegations from the Department of Defense, when it designated DJI in 2022 as a Chinese military company, had to do with just its role in kind of building up the Chinese military industrial capability. So DJI has been challenging these restrictions for years, but just a couple months ago, a U.S. federal court upheld that designation from the DoD and said there's substantial evidence that DJI contributes to the Chinese defense industrial base. It's kind of like how the Chinese military wouldn't want to buy something from Boeing because Boeing is fully integrated into the American and Western defense mechanisms. I think there's anxiety about just doing business with a company that is that integrated with the Chinese industrial and military complexes.
Yeah, what's scary to think about is there are these risks, obviously, where I'm sure our legislators know more about them than we do, just due to the nature and sensitivity of that information. But then DJI, right, is finding alternative ways to get their products into the US under like other company names, just stripping the DJI branding. And I know like most Americans like myself, we love a good deal, right? So DJI products, they look pretty good if you're not thinking about that.
Exactly. And so now there are these DJI clones that are available on the market, and they are inexpensive and easy to use and very appealing to consumers. But when you CT scan them, you learn that inside they are identical to DJI products that are banned. So DJI has been challenged on this. They claim that they have licensed their designs and technology to third parties that operate at arm's length. But regulators are very skeptical of that. And it sort of looks like these are Trojan horses, to get the company back into the American market.
It reminds me a little bit of the Chinese like spy balloon that floated over all of our nuclear missile sites
years
ago.
Yeah, I feel like DJI drones have probably streamed back a lot of like wedding group shots to headquarters in China.
I think the other real issue with DJI is because they undercut other companies so much on price, right? They forced a lot of these other companies out of existence, and it can be hard then for kind of American or other non-Chinese companies to have the financial resources to build up reasonable competitors that have removed supply chains.
That's right. And that's something that Adam talked about in his interview, is that it's very challenging to create an entirely American supply chain for something like this. If you think of drones as the peace dividend of the smartphone wars, that means they're being built through a lot of the same supply chains, a lot of the same raw inputs and component level inputs that were developed for smartphone manufacturing. So it's natural to locate drone manufacturing, amid the smartphone supply chains. And that typically means China. And if you look at what it takes to move phone manufacturing out of China, which a lot of the big phone manufacturers are interested in doing, it's quite expensive and challenging to replicate those supply chains in places like India, Vietnam, and Malaysia.
Yeah, like one great example of that are batteries, right? China produces about 75% of the lithium ion cells of the world and 80 to 90% of the refining materials. So even though there are some alternatives, they have such small market share and much less capacity to meet demand.
Right. These are highly centralized supply chains at this point.
Yeah, but hopefully as smartphone manufacturing manages to diversify a little bit better, the rest of the kind of adjacent industries will be able to follow more easily.
That's right. And as we see from Skydio's example, once you're able to generate a little bit of demand and build up the scale to manufacture in the US, it can become more competitive again. So the first part of the drone race was really about feature level innovation, getting these things to fly well and then packaging them into a product that people would find useful. The second phase was about industrialization and developing the scale that could make this, economical. The next phase is really about AI and autonomy, which is really the current arms race in a lot of subfields between the US and the rest of the world, in particular China.
Drones are a really incredible example of productizing AI, right? Because you can run all of these models and collect all of this data, but ultimately how it interfaces with people in real life will depend on cutting edge hardware integrating fully with those advances.
I love this stuff because a lot of what's hot in AI right now has to do with the strictly digital world, things that are just information. And drones are a great example of how AI can meet the physical world. All right. And with that, we will wrap up. In our next episode of Go No Go, we speak with Kyle Vogt, who founded Cruise as well as Twitch, and now has a new company called The Bot Company. We'll talk about what he's developing there. Alex, it's been a pleasure to talk today.
It's been a lot of fun, John.
Go No Go is brought to you by Lumafield, which makes industrial CT scanners and analysis software that help engineers deliver great products faster than ever. You can learn more at lumafield.com. Be sure to check out the notes that are attached to this podcast episode, where you'll find links to everything that we discussed. And if you want to reach us, email gng@lumafield.com. That's GNG like go no go at lumafield.com. For Go No Go, I'm Jon Bruner.
And I'm Alex Howe.
Go No Go is brought to you by Lumafield, which was founded to upgrade manufacturing. You can learn more at lumafield.com. Go No Go is produced by Austin Carter and edited by Brian Tran, with additional assistance from Eric Petralia.